Hi, my name is Parelee. I'm an app developer at Upward. Today we are going to go over how to implement follows within our apps on Upward platform. Follows are used to track activities and changes or updates within an app. A user who follows a certain information or a record within an app will get updates or notifications in the platform when there are changes made to that record. Welcome to Follows in Upward. We're going to go step by step through what needs to be done for you to be able to follow your information that you need within your apps. To implement follows, we are going to use support contracts and implement follows within support contracts. First thing we're going to do is we're going to add a follow button for the Fly app. We will go on to our screen design, add a button right here. Don't worry about the alignments just yet, we'll fix that. Right click on the button, configure screen button, and we will choose dark style. Configure, change the name of the button so it doesn't just say button. Follow, also the caption. And for the follow button, we also implement an image, which will be right here. I use keywords to go about it. If you want to keep copy paste, you can do that. You can do go follow the signs and use it like that. Then I'm going to select delete button with the follow button. Right click on that and choose align. First thing I'm going to align is the width and the height of the buttons, so they're both the same size. Then I'm going to use align again to align them at the top. So now they're both aligned at the same space. Once we're done, we can just go ahead and save, and we can see the follow button right there. We will come back to this later. So to start with implementing the follow button, we will go ahead and do object editor, go under our our main screen, and add variables. So we're going to add 3 variables. I'm going to add 3 sources that we can follow for now. So we'll call plan activity ID. So this will contain the plan activity ID once it's created. And then I'm going to add another one called renewal activity ID, and a third one for services. We will have services activity ID. These variables will contain the IDs for these 3 activities: plans, renewals, and services. Once we're done creating our variables, we will go down to our functions, our initialize function, and we are going to implement follow. I already have an array here, but you will dimension a follow array. You will use the parentheses to indicate that it's a array, and we will come down here. So we were going to be creating a follow activity array. This this array will have 3 columns. So it will be, we'll do follow array equals table create. This is a system function, so table create, number of rows that we're going to need. So it's the rows of the headers, and we're going to be using 3 objects, 3 things to follow. So that will be 4 rows and 3 columns. That's already set. And then for here, we'll do follow array row 0. For our row 0, which is our headers, we'll use split, which is also a system function. It splits a string where the separator is, so it will create a list kind of. So it will be object ID, activity ID, and description. Now, so once we have our header, we will go to the next row. So follow array row 1. And we will be filling in the information that will be under these headers. So for object ID, we will be using the variables that we created under pop main. So it will be screen, which is pop main right here. It shows alias for pop main. Screen dot var plan activity ID \value, and or append, we're gonna connect comma renew. This is for the plan, so it's going to be the plan change, so it will be support plan change. This will contain the activity ID once activity ID is created. Support plan change, comma, the description for the support plan change, which will be notify on support plan change. And we will close quotation marks and parentheses. Next row will be follow array row 2. It's the same process, so screen dot var, we can do renewal \value, same process. For this one, we will do renew contract. And it will be notify on support contract. Support contract renewal. That will be our description for that activity. And the last one we're going to use is follow array the row 3 for the services. So it's still gonna be the same thing. One thing, if you notice I missed, is the split. So we need to create a split for all of this, so they will be under their proper columns. Split, and also here it will be split screen dot services activity ID \value append, and the description for this will be notify on service done. So when a service is done, it will notify whoever is registered to be whoever's following the activity. After this, we're going to use, on the top, you can see that we have our association functions already implemented in the include because we are using them here. So you will go include my workspace, user resource functions, shared functions, association functions. This will be at the top because you will be using it within the script. After creating the table, we will go ahead and call a function called func check create object activities, the first one that comes up. It takes in an array. Here it shows that records array, so that's what we will be passing in, equals follow array. We will be passing in our array, and that will check if any of these already have an object associated with them. And if it does, it will just return the activity ID, or not. Later, it will create one. So then we will go ahead and get the association objects for each of these. So we'll do screen dot var plan activity ID \value equals function get association object activity. So we will be using the second one, And for this, you pass in the object ID. Object ID being what we're associating this with, which is support contract. And we already have this up here, as you can see, if the support contracts object ID. So that's what we're going to be using. For a plan, that object ID will be used for follows that are app level. This one is a record level, but what that means is a specific record changes, not any changes to the entire app, which will be using the record object ID. It's still an object ID, but for the record, not the entire app. So we'll go ahead and use that screen var object ID \value. Then we're going to add in our activity. We're going to be using the name we gave, and it's going to be a string, which is support plan change. And close. We're gonna repeat that for all three. So screen ID, so get association object activity, and then we'll do screen dot var record object ID \value. This is incorrect. And we'll be using renew contract and for the ID \value equals func get association object activity screen dot var service activity ID \value, and we're going to use I have to correct something here, so I have to add in service done, which I didn't, so on the comma here. Okay, so service done, that's what we're going to be using here. Okay, so service done. So all of these match the activity ID that we have here. All of the variables are set, and we can go ahead and save and compile our, oops, we got an error. Go ahead and compile all of our code. Once it's compiled, we can exit. So our next step, once we created all the association objects, will be to create a function add support contract activity. So this is what we're going to be working on. So add support contract activity, or you can name it whatever app you are working on. Go ahead and going into add support contract activities, you can see that we have two parameters. We added the parameters called message. This will be the narrative of the activity added, and then we have the activity ID that will be passed in. In our script, we will be using our user resource functions and the arrays that we've built to create this array. This array is for activity links that will be passed during editing and adding or wherever we want to record an activity. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to bring in our functions from our user resource function. So include my workspace, user resources, shared functions, activity functions. And then we are going to alias our screen, which will be make it easier for us to use pop main. Then we are going to add some variables. One is for activity array, activity link array. The other one is our app ID. So again, it will be easier to use. Then we are going to build an array of activity links. Just like we did before in initialize, we are going to create a table, activity link equals table create a system function again. We will only need 2 rows and 3 columns for this one. So it will be our first row, or row 0, split. So we have a list, object ID, record ID, and object activity ID. So our first row will be activity link equals split not for that one. Our first row is going to be row 1. Since this is going to be only one row, we will put in our column name, which is object ID, equals screen dot var object ID backslash value. So that's going to be our object ID that we're passing in. And then for the second column, which is record ID, we are going to be using what ID is, what record this is for. So to be accurate, we're going to use our data table, which is also under the pop main. So support contract ID backslash value. And for the last one will be the activity ID, which will be passed in. So it will be activity link and object activity ID. So object activity ID, that's our column name, equals activity ID, which we have up here. It's a parameter that the user needs to pass in order to get the follows. This happens on an edit level. And lastly, we will call func add activity. This way, once all of this is passed in, the activity will be added. So we will be passing in the app ID. It also requires a description. For the description, we're going to pass in the message, whatever message the user uses. And the array of links, which is this one, we will be passing in activity link. And with that, we have a function. This function will be used in our edit or add process. So compile. So once we make sure that everything is done, we will compile our code. Just make sure everything is written correctly and compile, and that's that. We will save the function. This can be called in your edit function or your add function. So if you're going to add support contracts, if you have an add variable, you can add it here. So whenever an add takes place, the user is notified, or in the edit support contract as part of the editing process. So for this one, we have add support contract activity. We are passing in a record object ID, which is our IDs for the activity, and we will be able to see the activities that once they are done. In one of our edit functions, something that we are following, so sales orders, we can go ahead and we are already calling our functions, include functions. So here we will call func add support contract activity, and the message, this is the message. You can do it like a variable, or you can just implement this whole thing. So we'll just do message, and then it asks for an activity ID. We're going to be using the record object ID to implement that. So it will go to pop main var record object ID \value, and this way when the editing of sales orders hit, it's changed, we will get a notification if we are following this activity. Now we're going to go into our support contracts and the follow button. We'll go into screen design again. In the after click, we will bring in our UR functions for activities, include my workspace dot user resources, and call func show act. We'll bring in our follows and show follow activities, and we will pass in the contact ID. It's requiring a contact ID, so the person who is getting the follow. So we will do pop first parameter is contact ID. We are going to be using the user who's the contact, so we will be getting that from our user resources. So my workspace user resources user info / contact ID. Then we will be using the object ID, which will be again pop main var record object ID \value, and then for the record ID we're going to use pop main dot support contract edit dot contract ID. Let me expand this a little bit. \value, and we're going to close that. The rest of the parameters it's just a listener that we don't need right now, and that's how the scripting is done for this portion of follows. Now, if you click on the follow button, it will show a pop-up. This is our user resource functions. So as you can see, it brought in support plans, services done, and sales order changes. Also brought in start date and end date. These were extra variables that existed under support plans previously. So once you select any of these, you will be following the changes within support contracts. That was the process of implementing follows within apps in our platform. For more tips and tricks or information about our platform, please visit appword.com.